Morning friends, welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. My name is Avinash Agarwal, and in this video I'll be discussing with you important current affairs, economics current affairs for 22nd June 2024. I have selected 3 articles from the Mint newspaper, and based on those 3 articles I have created certain model questions which will give you an idea, which will give you a sense about the kind of questions that you may anticipate, you may expect in the examination. We have been doing this since last 1 week, and all the responses that I have gotten regarding this exercise has been generally positive. So we will be continuing with this exercise going ahead of putting a question on top of our discussion and allowing the question to guide your decision making. Okay. So the 3 questions that I have created for you are something like this. So question number 1 deals with monetary policy. So the question is that discuss the recent debates within RBI's Monetary Policy Committee regarding balance between inflation control and fostering economic growth in India. Critically evaluate the effectiveness of maintaining a neutral monetary policy stance amidst varying growth projections and inflationary pressures. So this is a very contextual question. You may not be asked exactly the same kind of a question, but you have to be prepared to be able to deal with or handle such kinds of discussions. If you are sitting in an interview and if they are discussing with you, let's say what's happening recently, then you need to be able to have these kinds of things under control. Next question is even more contextual, right? So take it with a pinch of salt, I'm saying it myself. Discuss recent deliberations of the GST Council regarding taxation of extra neutral alcohol in India's spirits industry. Analyze the implications of the proposed legislative amendments and exemptions on the industry, considering both economic and regulatory aspects. Evaluate the potential benefits of these changes in harmonizing taxation and reducing litigation, while also addressing the concerns raised by stakeholders. Now, some of you may want to write in the comment section that you do not expect such narrowly focused questions in your examinations, and I would wholeheartedly agree with you. What I'm trying to say over here is that this extra neutral alcohol may not be as contentious as an issue as maybe something else, but if let us say GST Council is deliberating something which is important, something which is hogging the headline, something which is hogging the editorial space, then be prepared to handle such kinds of topics. Third question is very relevant. Examine the recent imposition of stock limits on Tu and Chana by Indian government amidst rising prices and supply constraints. Discuss the effectiveness of such measures in controlling inflation and ensuring food security, considering the challenges posed by erratic weather patterns and fluctuating production levels. Evaluate the potential impact of these regulations on stakeholders across the pulses supply chain, and suggest measures to achieve sustainable management of essential commodity prices in India. So this is something which is extremely relevant. You must have faced these kinds of questions in the past, or you must have seen such kinds of questions in the previous year papers as well. This is an important running debate in India, that can imposition of stock limits and usage of essential commodities act and such 50-year-old kind of measures guide the policy making going ahead in terms of food management in India, in terms of prices management in India. So these are going to be my 3 topics that I'll be discussing with you. Let us start our discussion with the first topic around Monetary Policy Committee. Okay. So in one of my discussions last week, we did touch upon this topic. Now let us see. So what has happened is that Monetary Policy Committee's meeting took place in the recent past, and minutes of those meetings have now been released. So what was said by the RBI governor, what was said by various members of the Monetary Policy Committee regarding the tussle between, let us say, inflation on one hand and growth on another hand, that should we keep interest rates high so that we can tame inflation? Should we cut interest rates so that we do not lose out on economic growth potential? What should we do? So certain Monetary Policy Committee members such as Jayant Verma and Ashima Goyal have been advocating for a rate cut, because they feel that the sacrifice that the Indian economy will make in terms of growth, that is unjustified, that is not required. So we should reduce the policy rates, is what they have said. On the other hand, you have Michael Patra, you have RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das and others who have advocated that no, we should keep the monetary policy, the policy rates high, because the task of controlling inflation is incomplete. Growth momentum is strong. There are favorable tailwinds. There is no need to, leave this task of controlling inflation incomplete. So these are the two sides of the coin that this particular article speaks about. I have already given you a sense of what is going to come ahead, so I will move ahead at a brisk speed. Okay, so there are certain concerns that should we control inflation or should we try to foster growth, right? Now, like I mentioned to you, one idea by Jayant Verma and Ashima Goyal is that keeping real interest rates high for too long will hurt growth, and there is no need for us to go down this road, right? Now, what does Jayant Verma say? Jayant Verma says that if you look at what professional forecasters have been saying, so for professional forecasters are saying that growth in 25-26 and in 24-25 it will be lower than 23-24. It will be lower by 0.75 percentage points, right? And if you consider the potential growth rate for the Indian economy as 8%, then you will be exactly 1%, let us say, below that potential growth rate of 8%. What do I mean by potential growth rate? Potential growth rate is a very fascinating concept for me. It tells you the level of production increase that your economy can generate without really stoking inflation, without really stoking any kind of instability, without really stoking any kind of macro problems. So potential growth rate is something that you can easily and efficiently achieve, is how in a very layman's language I understand the meaning of the term potential growth, right? So when we say that the potential growth rate is 8%, that means that real GDP can increase by 8%, right? It can increase by 8%. Anything more than that will generate some kind of instability. It will probably heat up the economy too much, cause inflation. Anything less than that is going to be subpar. We will not be making optimal utilization of our factors of production. So that is also something that we don't want. So we want to grow as near as possible to our potential growth rate, neither too much more than that, neither too much less than that, right? Just keep that in mind. So what Jayant Verma is saying is that we will be losing out on our potential growth rate. That is a high growth sacrifice. We should not do this growth sacrifice given the fact that core inflation is extremely benign. So yes, food inflation is high. Yes, fuel inflation in rural India may be high. But if you look at the underlying core inflation, which is basically the basket of goods and services, removing these volatile items of food and fuel, then things are absolutely benign. There is no reason why you should maintain a neutral policy stance. Rather, you should go towards an expansionary policy stance, or at least reduce the policy rates, right? Similar ideas have been advocated by Ashima Goyal. Expected growth rate being around 7%. So this status quoism that RBI, the mode of status quoism, where we are not changing the policy rates and not reducing them, we are holding on to our neutral policy stance. It's not helpful. It is actually going to come at a sacrifice of our growth. Okay. On the other hand, you have Governor Shaktikanta Das, who is saying that there is enough space to create focus on inflation. The economy is doing reasonably well, right? Shaktikanta Das continues by saying that there is persistently high food inflation and it warrants a disinflationary policy stance. This high food inflation, it warrants a disinflationary policy stance. What do I mean by a disinflationary policy stance? So that's a policy stance which is trying to, let's say, reduce the rate of inflation from, let's say, around plus 7% or plus 8% to, let us say, around plus 5% or plus 4%. That is what disinflation means, that you reduce the rate of inflation. You are still having inflation in the positive territory. That means that prices are rising, but prices are rising at a reducing rate, right? That is what I mean by a disinflationary policy stance. So I hope that this is clear. If there is any doubt, please ask. Okay. Now, India's growth has been, it has been good. We have clocked 8.2% growth in FY24 thanks to manufacturing, construction, mining and services, right? And there is no reason why we should not intensify our monetary policy vigil upon inflation in this positive growth scenario, right? Michael Patra says that the objective of controlling inflation completely is not yet complete. So therefore, we should focus on that particular task, right? And there is a favorable growth inflation balance and outlook is pointing towards status quo, is what Rajiv Ranjan is saying, right? So there is, as you can see now, there is a disagreement. Now, there are two words that I want to introduce into your vocabulary, that is doves and hawks. So doves are those who are advocating, let us say, for an expansionary kind of a monetary policy or an easy money policy or something like that. They are dopes. They feel that inflation is not such a huge problem. You don't need to, be overly focused upon inflation. That is the typical meaning of dopes. What is the meaning of hawks? So hawks are those who are, let us say, too focused upon inflation. They are like, always in a, not always, but they are like, in a warlike mode. They are advocating a warlike mode upon inflation, that we have to do everything that we can do to, let us say, bring inflation down. So they tend to have, a preference for, contractionary monetary policy. Okay. So that's the difference between doves and hawks. So we haven't used the word hawks over here. We have used the word doves, who are advocating, let us say, reduction in policy rate, who are advocating expansionary monetary policy, let us say, right? And then there are status quoists who are saying that no, let us maintain the neutral policy stance of our monetary policy. Okay, so that's the debate between doves and status quoists. So if you are actually sitting in an interview anywhere, and if you get an opportunity to use these words, doves, status quoists, neutral monetary policy, hawks, right? Go ahead and use those words. You will impress, or you will communicate to the other person that, okay, you know what you're talking about. And I hope that you know what you're talking about, right? So as per the doves, those who are saying that reduce the policy rates, India's output gap will slip into negative territory. What do I mean by India's output gap will slip into negative territory? So actual growth rate of the economy minus the potential growth rate, that is the output gap, right? Keep that in mind. I will repeat myself once. Actual growth rate of the economy minus the potential growth rate is equal to the output gap. Okay. So let's say that you achieve 7% growth rate. The potential growth rate can be 8%, like we discussed above. So 7% minus 8% is equals to minus 1. And that is what this first statement is saying, that India's output gap will slip into negative territory if we are maintaining such high levels of policy rates. That is what those are saying, right? On the other hand, status quoists are saying that India's growth prospects, they are promising. We have surplus monsoon, which we are expecting. We are having, improvement in the global trade prospects. The headwinds from Russia-Ukraine war, from the Israel-Palestinian crisis seems to be settling down. We have superior quality of fiscal consolidation ongoing in India, meaning that yes, not only have we reduced the borrowing burden of the government of India, but at the same time, we have not sacrificed capital expenditure to reduce our borrowing burden. So that is what I mean by superior quality of fiscal consolidation. So sound corporate balance sheets, your top 100, 200 companies in India are making a decent amount of profit. There is a bull run ongoing up in the stock market, probably backed by the kind of profitability that these firms are exhibiting. And there is also an improvement in productivity. So looking at these benign signals, there is no need to panic, is what status quoists believe. So this is a nice conclusion. This particular paragraph over here, two paragraphs over here that we discussed, this is basically a nice conclusion of this entire debate, which you can also employ when you are giving your answers or writing your answers. I hope that this article was very clear. If there is any doubt, please ask. Okay, moving ahead to the next one. So GST Council is likely to tweak alcohol laws so that certain disputes, confusion, etc. in the spirits industry can be taken away. But before I jump into this article, I just want to take 30 seconds and tell you why this is important. Okay, so you have to understand that consumption of alcohol and taxation based on that consumption of alcohol, that's a major source of revenue for state governments in India. Major source of revenue, right? So there is a lot of tussle going on between various state governments on one hand and central government on the other hand regarding taxation of alcohol. Number one. Number two, alcohol producing industry or the spirits industry, not only does it contribute to the GDP of the country, not only does it contribute to taxes, but also generates employment. So that in itself is an important industry, right? So, and the third aspect is that this idea that we have to have clarity, remove ambiguity, confusion around taxation of alcohol, that is what this is going to talk about. This article is going to talk about, right? So we can expect some kind of tax relief for the spirits industry around the corner because the government of India is looking at exempting extra neutral alcohol from GST. Now, what is extra neutral alcohol? It is pure form of alcohol that is used in liquor production. You do not directly consume extra neutral alcohol, but you can consider extra neutral alcohol to be an important intermediate good in the production of final good, which is, let us say, liquor for human consumption. Okay. Now, you know it as a matter of fact that alcohol for human consumption is outside of GST purview. But unfortunately, when those laws were being drafted, there was silence upon what happens to extra neutral alcohol. Is it within the purview of GST or is it outside the purview of GST? So there wasn't any clarity. So as a result of which there has been confusion, ambiguity, litigation, and so on. And that is the exact problem that we are trying to solve by saying, probably, if we do say that extra neutral alcohol is outside GST full stop. Let's just say that. So right now that has not been said so far in our GST laws. That's what we want to say very clearly in the GST laws, that this is outside the purview of GST. Okay. So another aspect that is getting discussed is that we are thinking of putting into place a scheme that will allow authorities to drop recovery of past tax dues. Right. We'll forget about these litigations, etc. So that will kind of, make it easier for businesses to do business. So on. Right. So it will resolve ongoing tax disputes. It will streamline the taxation process. Right. And like I said, the proposed legislative amendments, they will ensure that ENA, that is extra neutral alcohol, remains outside the GST regime, so that we can remove ambiguity in our tax implementation. Okay. Now, as I explained to you, that nowhere have we explicitly said that ENA will be outside the GST framework so far. Right. So that is exactly what we want to do. Because see, right now what is happening is that state governments may be putting a tax on ENA. Central government in certain cases may be putting a tax on ENA. So there is a double taxation ka burden upon ENA, and therefore upon the spirits industry. Therefore prices remain high. Therefore consumers have to shell out a higher amount of money, and maybe because of that sales may get affected, as a result of which state governments may not be able to get whatever revenue that they want to get out of these transactions. Right. So everybody becomes a loser when a particular item is, let us say, being taxed twice. Right. So by bringing into place this clarification, okay, we will be reducing the tax burden, and we will be in a way giving a boost to the alcoholic beverages industry. Okay. Now you have to understand, like I have mentioned, that ENA, it is derived from fermenting and distilling molasses or grain. Now this is also very, very beautiful. Okay. We'll be discussing the beauty of this just in a couple of seconds. So just hold on. Right. So there is, like I said, ENA is taxed only under the excise duty regime. Right. We have to ensure that. Right now what is happening is that the state governments or the central government may be double taxing it. So we want to avoid that. Now the important part over here is that the moment ENA remains only under state excise and VAT regime, and there is no imposition of GST upon ENA, right? And this is very clear to everyone. Then what happens is that you, as somebody who is, let us say, procuring ENA or using ENA, right? So you know it as a matter of fact that you can get your VAT credits, right? And that your production costs will go down because GST is not going to come in your way. Okay. So that's the important part over here. Okay. Now, if you try to levy GST upon ENA, you will be adding to the cost of ENA, like you must have understood. And there is no credit facility, because like that if I'm using ENA as a raw material and producing liquor for human consumption as a final product, okay, I'm paying GST on this. I am not collecting GST on this, right? So I cannot take input tax credit because I have paid input tax upon raw material. I am not collecting any GST for the finished good that I am selling. So I'm not really paying anything to the central government. All right. So I'm not able to settle my input tax, right, against whatever I have collected on the finished goods. So that is why that whatever GST if I am paying upon ENA, that is just money that is lost. It is not credited. On the other hand, whatever VAT I am paying, that is value added tax that I am paying on my raw material, whatever value added tax that I am collecting on the finished goods, I can settle off the tax that I have paid upon the raw material against the tax that I have collected from the finished good, right? And that is what I mean, that I will be able to take credit under the VAT regime, but whatever GST that I pay upon ENA is something that I am exactly just losing, right? I'm not able to recover that. So that's like an added cost over here, right? So as you are understanding, that if we are able to bring upon this clarification, it will help almost every stakeholder, right? Now, the beautiful part that I wanted to talk about over here was that in India, the spirits industry is pretty diverse. So there isn't one route or one process followed to manufacture ENA in India. Multiple processes are there. Like for example, you may be an integrated producer, you may be having your own molasses, so you do not need to pay any GST on the raw material because you own the raw material from, let us say, day zero, right? Or you may not be an integrated spirits producer, in which case you may be buying molasses by paying GST, or you may be brewing liquor from grain and you do not have to pay any GST on grains, so you are in a way directly or indirectly free or exempted from GST, right? So you can see over here that the industry in India, the structure of industry in India in itself is so fascinating. This is what I wanted to talk about. So I hope that this article is clear. It was a little technical. Somebody who is not familiar with input tax credit, GST, VAT may have not really appreciated everything. I just want you to, if you have not understood, just go back and hear it again. And if still there is any doubt, please ask. I'll be happy to answer your doubts. Okay. So moving ahead to the third article, center imposes stock limit on Tu and Chana. Okay. So see, the idea over here is fairly straightforward. This has been happening time and time again. So what has happened is that certain stock limits have been imposed on Tu and Chana. Why? Because there are concerns regarding prices. There are concerns regarding crop failure, bottlenecking the supplies. So we want to just kind of make sure that no unnecessary stocking, hoarding, etc. is happening in these items, and these items are released into the market and prices are kept under control, right? So yeah, so this stock limit, it will be applicable on an immediate basis to wholesalers, retailers, big chain retailers, millers and importers. So you can see that how detrimental it will be. These guys may have purchased these items. They may be having working capital blocked for this particular item. They may be thinking that, okay, we are going to generate X amount of revenue, Y amount of profit by processing these items. And suddenly, you get a notification from the government which says that, okay, get rid of the raw material that you have purchased. So your entire effort has been wasted. Your entire working capital that you had blocked, you do not make the money that you should make upon that working capital. This is not how businesses are run in India. This is not how you generate investments in these particular spaces in India, because you are discouraging wholesalers, retailers, big chain retailers, millers and importers from, let us say, working on these items going ahead because of the negative impact that they will face because of such notifications, right? So like I said, that the government is trying to prevent hoarding and speculation. I'm not even sure whether they have any ground reports of hoarding and speculation, yet they believe that this measure will prevent hoarding and speculation. They think that this will make it affordable for consumers. They think that it will help. You never know, right? So these are the exact stock limits. I'm not going to go into the details of this, right? These are the stock limits for importers, right? So these are the basic details, right? Now this is the latest move by the government so that we can bring the prices of these essential commodities down, right? And your Department of Consumer Affairs has been closely monitoring what has been happening in this particular space, right? Earlier we had asked state governments to enforce mandatory stock disclosures by all stock holding entities, right? Thereafter we made a visit to major producing states and trading hubs to see if there are any irregularities over there. So you see that these are gradations of steps, that you disclose your stocks, there are going to be field visits, surprise visits, etc. And then these kinds of orders are coming in, right? So now the idea is that meetings were held with these stakeholders so that we can encourage and sensitize them that they need to truthfully disclose the stocks and they need to keep the pulses affordable. That is not their job. See boss, you have to understand, okay, that I'm not over here to make anything affordable for anybody. Sorry, I mean, it sounds very harsh, right? But the reality is that, think about it. If you are a miller, if you are a retailer, what is it that you are into? You are into it so that you can procure raw material, convert it into a finished good, and then sell it at a profit to you. That is what you are into. If the government believes that, okay, Tu and Chana is not going to be available, then incentivize the farmers to produce more, right? Then do something about in the form of, let us say, holding a buffer stock. Why penalize these private entities if the public if the government cannot achieve what it is setting out to achieve, You'll see these articles coming in the form of editorials shortly. These kinds of measures are heavily criticized every time that they are used, right? Now there is some data regarding prices of pulses, so I'm just going to skip that part over here, right? So production, two major pulses of Tu and Chana, that has fallen for 2 consecutive crop years. Why? Need to dig into that. That is the root cause of this problem, right? That's because of unseasonal rains, that's because of deficit rainfall, that is because of prolonged dry spells. So do something for the farmers. If unseasonal rains or deficit rainfall or dry spell is a problem, then create irrigation in those areas. Do some rainwater harvesting in those areas, right? Maybe encourage farmers from other areas to grow these crops by providing them a remunerative MSP kind of a situation, right? I'm again skipping the prices part over here. Okay, I'm again skipping the prices part over here. So anyways, this is just the start of our discussion on most of these topics. So I'm reasonably sure that there are going to be deeper analytical articles on all of these 3 very newsy articles that I have selected. Again, I would like to emphasize that if there is any doubt, please feel free to ask. I will be happy to answer your questions. I'll be bringing this session to an end. You can download this note from the Ecoholics app for no additional cost to you. Very, very easy to use app. Do the registration, download the note, and make sure that you are well prepared for the examinations coming ahead. Thank you so much. All the very best. Jai Hind. Take care. Bye bye.